So what exactly makes human sexuality so different from the rest of the animal kingdom? I mean, it's a fundamental question, right? Because if we look at the non-human animal world, sexual behavior is, well, it's pretty much automatic. It's basically this biological engine strictly controlled by hormones and pheromones. They're just reacting instinctively to their environment. But for us, for humans, the story is completely different. It's vastly more complex.
The big differentiator? It's the mind. For us, human arousal isn't just some basic biological reflex. It deeply, absolutely requires cognitive and emotional processes to happen. Our psychological selves and our physical bodies actually have to work together in this really incredible, intricate dance for satisfying sexual arousal and activity to even take place.
Welcome to this explainer on the physiology of sexual response. Today, we're going to trace the fascinating, honestly, constantly evolving science of how humans experience sex. We'll be taking a journey from the sheer, raw mechanics of the physical body all the way to the incredibly complex, powerful desires of the mind. And as you'll see, we'll uncover exactly how early pioneers in science mapped this whole thing out.
Okay, let's dive into the agenda for this explainer really quickly. We've got 5 main parts. 1. The mind-body connection. 2. The 4-stage Epor model. 3. Climax and resolution. 4. Cracks in the model. And finally, number 5. Alternative models of arousal. Let's go ahead and start with the physical body.
Section 1. The mind-body connection. The unique dance of human biology and psychology.
You know, to really grasp this uniquely human trait, we've got to look back at pioneers like Alfred Kinsey and, of course, the groundbreaking work of Masters and Johnson. They highlighted this really stark contrast. They showed that while non-human animals operate on this automatic, totally hormone-driven loop, human beings require deep cognitive and emotional engagement. It's absolutely crucial. So as we start looking at these early physical models, just keep in mind that the body, that's really only half the picture here.
Moving on to Section 2. The 4-stage Epor model. Masters and Johnson's physical blueprint.
So to figure out exactly what happens physically, Masters and Johnson observed an absolutely astonishing 10,000 sexual response cycles in a clinical setting. I mean, think about that scale. This massive undertaking resulted in what's known as the EPOR model, which maps out 4 distinct phases: excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. Now, while they divided it into these 4 neat stages just to make it easier to understand, they were very careful to note that this is actually a continuous, flowing physical reaction to any form of sexual stimulation. So what actually kicks off this entire cycle? Well, across all sexes, the very first physical step is something called vasocongestion. Basically, this is the swelling of erectile tissues as blood rapidly circulates into them. This physical swelling is kind of the engine, the main driver of the excitement phase. And it doesn't happen in isolation. It happens right alongside an increase in heart rate, heavier breathing, and a tensing of voluntary muscles all throughout the body. Let's zoom in on the excitement phase in the male anatomy. The most obvious sign here, of course, is the erection of the penis while the scrotal skin tightens and the testicles actually begin to elevate. But, you know, it's really important we normalize the everyday reality of this physical experience. A full erection might not happen right away. And losing an erection at this stage just because of some random distraction, that is completely normal and honestly usually very easily regained.
By contrast, if we look at the female excitement phase, the very first physical change is the erection of the clitoris, though the most perceptible sign is generally vaginal lubrication. Internally, though, there's this really fascinating shift that occurs. The labia minora increase in size and the inner 2/3 of the vagina actually begins to actively expand and lengthen.
Okay, so as sexual arousal continues, we naturally move right into the plateau phase. Here, arousal remains super high, but it starts increasing at a slower, steadier pace. For the male body, those erectile tissues we talked about become fully engorged. The penis is now fully erect, the testicles are pulled up very closely against the body, and at this specific point, an erection is actually much less likely to be lost.
Now, during the female plateau phase, the outer third of the vaginal wall swells significantly, which actually reduces the size of the opening. Meanwhile, that inner vagina expands fully in a process that's scientifically referred to as tenting. But here's a really crucial detail. The glans of the clitoris actually retracts closer to the body and tucks under its hood. What that means is additional stimulation is often needed right here just to progress to the next stage.
All right, Section 3, climax and resolution, the peak of sexual arousal and the return to baseline. This brings us to the absolute shortest but definitely most intense phase of the whole cycle, the orgasm. Believe it or not, it typically lasts less than 15 seconds. Now, the really crucial biological divergence between the sexes happens right here. For both males and females, orgasm involves these rhythmic pelvic contractions that happen exactly every 0.8 seconds. It's like clockwork. But here's the difference. While the male orgasm features the emission of semen followed by this biological refractory period, which basically prevents immediate rearousal, the female orgasm features anywhere from 3 to 15 contractions without that refractory period. So biologically speaking, that allows for multiple orgasms with continued stimulation.
Yet, despite all those stark anatomical differences we just went through, the actual lived experience, it's incredibly shared. Survey data consistently reveals that men and women describe the profound emotional and physical sensations of orgasm, things like pleasurable satisfaction, deep emotional intimacy, and just pure ecstasy, in remarkably similar ways. They're practically identical on an emotional level.
Taking a quick breather from the anatomy for a second, the research here is just fascinating. It proves that orgasms offer these incredible universal health benefits that go way, way beyond just physical pleasure. We're talking about boosting immune strength to fight off viruses, relieving pain naturally by raising your tolerance, and even promoting much better sleep thanks to a massive dopamine release. It's even correlated with lower rates of prostate cancer in men and significantly less heart disease. It's basically this unbelievable full-body biological reward system.
So following that intense peak, the body enters the resolution phase. It's rapidly returning to its pre-aroused baseline state. Things like heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle tension, they all drop off pretty quickly as blood flows right back out of the erectile tissues in both male and female bodies. It's just the system naturally winding down and hitting the reset button.
Which brings us to Section 4, cracks in the model, what the purely physical EPOR model missed. Okay, so as incredibly groundbreaking as Masters and Johnson were for their time, modern science eventually had to take a step back and ask, can human sexuality genuinely be defined by this rigid, four-stage physical loop? And critics started pointing out some pretty massive blind spots. For one, the EPOR model totally neglects the crucial emotional components. Actually, it completely omits the entire concept of sexual desire. Which really begs the question, would a physical cycle even start in the first place if you didn't actually want to have sex? On top of that, the model is overly linear and it's been highly criticized for being androcentric. Basically, it assumes that the wonderfully complex nature of female sexuality functions on the exact same linear track as male sexuality, which we know isn't always the case.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, Alternative Models of Arousal, bringing the mind back into the equation.
Recognizing all these cracks in the foundation, a new wave of researchers stepped up to prioritize the mind. First up, we have Helen Singer Kaplan. She totally revolutionized the model with one seemingly simple change. She put a brand new phase at the very beginning, and she called it desire. I mean, she argued quite logically that a physiological response is highly unlikely if a person doesn't actually want to have sex first. By making desire the necessary first step, before physical excitement and before orgasm, she created a model that was way more suited for addressing real-world psychological hurdles.
Then, we have David Reed's beautifully psychological approach, which he called the erotic stimulus pathway. Instead of using all those clinical medical terms, he mapped out deeply emotional human experiences. In his model, desire becomes seduction. You know, the behaviors we use to attract a partner. Excitement becomes sensations. Orgasm, he calls that surrender, which is just giving oneself completely over to the moment. And resolution becomes reflection, which is a time to evaluate and process that shared intimacy. It's a much more holistic view.
And finally, we have to talk about Jansen and Bancroft's dual control theory. This model is brilliant because it treats our brains exactly like a gas pedal and a brake in a car. So we have a sexual excitation system, the gas, driven by things like attraction, fantasies, and partner trust. And then we have a sexual inhibition system, the brakes, which gets triggered by stress, life worries, fear, or even just a lack of privacy. According to this theory, optimal arousal only happens when our excitement system effectively outweighs all those anxieties and inhibitions. It is entirely 100% about psychological balance.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. But I want to leave you all with this final, kind of provocative thought to chew on. At the end of the day, is human sexuality truly defined by the body's mechanics, or is it defined by the mind's desires? Based on everything we've looked at, I'd say this. While our brilliant, incredibly complex physical anatomy is undoubtedly the engine,
It's our deeply human psychology that will always, always be the driver.